Hey guys, Pater Franson here from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions. Welcome to Essential Issues Weekly, where I talk about DC Comics 1 week, or usually I do this anyway. I talk about DC Comics 1 week after they release on the Ultra tier of the DC Universe Infinite subscription service. In each installment, I pick an assortment of comics to talk about as a DC fan and also explore what, if anything, they have to say about the essential issues of real life. Now, warning, full spoilers for everything I talk about. That's your first and only warning. Holy crap, I've got some catching up to do. The Christmas season was very busy, and so starting around mid-November, I put this series on hiatus, and I'm getting caught up now as best I can, but thankfully, at least, this just means I really get to talk about comics that I really have something to say about, although we really have to blow through a lot here to cover the rest of what I haven't talked about from November's Ultra tier releases and all of what I haven't talked about yet from December's Ultra tier releases. So first up, we've got Justice League Unlimited number 12. This is part of the DCKO tie-in where DC characters, heroes, are being forced to fight each other in order to determine a champion that will inherit this kind of omega element that will make them able to defeat Darkseid or something like that, because there's this omega heart that will grant a champion, blah, 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 blah. It's just a very convoluted and very thinly veiled excuse to have heroes fighting each other, and that can work for me sometimes, but the main installments of DCKO have not been very exciting to me, very engaging to me. They're kind of overly simplistic in my view. I'll get to that in maybe a second here. But the tie-ins, I'm finding some things that I enjoy in the tie-ins. And so this tie-in I'm enjoying because as part of Mr. Terrific's efforts to, while outside of the competition, save the universe from Darkseid, he recruits heroes from DC's past, taking them just taking them seconds out of their lives. You know, like just taking a 1 second of Superman Blue. Like I guess it's convoluted. They don't explain it well because I don't think you can explain it in a way that makes sense. But the idea is he's pulling heroes out of DC's history in a way that's somehow not going to mess up with time, even though by pulling them out, they're kind of dying. He's creating a pocket reality at the same time, so he's not interrupting the flow of history anyway. Again, it's just a convoluted excuse to temporarily revive some of these iterations of DC characters, such as Superman when he was the blue energy version of Superman from, I want to say, the late 90s, very early 2000s, late 90s is more like it. Aquaman also from that era when he had the harpoon hand. We've got Terry McGinnis, Batman Beyond. Although you don't see it on the cover, there's also Guy Gardner Warrior when he had the big red W on his chest, wearing a black coat, and had Sinestro's yellow ring. And so it's kind of fun to see some of these versions of these characters brought back, to be reminded, especially in the case of Guy Gardner, how much that character has changed and developed over the years. So it was just a nice little treat in Justice League Unlimited number 12. Then we've got DCKO number 2. I guess I would just briefly say here that the main installments of DCKO are not very interesting to me because they don't seem interested in engaging with this concept in the way that I would like them to. I mean, I remember as early as junior high talking with my friends in the locker room in school PE about, like, okay, who would win in a fight? And we'd sort through that, and we took that as seriously as we could, matching their powers, their skills, what they had done in the past, who they'd been up against in the past, and really try to figure out, okay, who would win. I think that's interesting. I think when fans have those kinds of conversations or thought projects, that they're really engaged on that level. DCKO seems less interested in that and more interested in just giving us a reason to see these characters die, see these characters get killed by other characters, whether or not it necessarily makes the most sense for such and such character to win and such character to lose. Now, I think that the type of thing that I want to see in this kind of competition, again, is happening in some of the tie-ins, but these main issues, DCKO1, DCKO2, this is not where I'm getting the best of this event for what I would want. Next up, Superman Red and Blue 2025 Special #1. I was almost ready to skip over this because it's one of those one-shots that just kind of has a theme, and it's a bunch of shorter stories that aren't really going to have impact on the status quo in the main DC universe. It's just kind of a gimmick where all the stories are specifically visually presented in combinations only of the colors red and blue. The first story in here, actually there's only one story in here that I really found interesting, and that's the second story that's a sort of day in the life of Superman, but specifically at a time in Superman's life when John Kent was still young, which again is another reminder to me that there is a contingent of writers, probably editors as well, at DC who recognize we are far from extracting all that we can from Superman and Lois being parents of a young child, and from John Kent being a young child, or in this case, even like a baby. I mean, I could have done with them having years of John Kent as a baby, and I certainly dislike aging him up from kind of an elementary age kid. Yeah, but I mean, like I'm just kind of like talking into the wind at this point. Anyway, in this story, which starts out with an alarm going off, a baby crying. Actually, it's a baby crying that gets him up out of bed. John, presumably crying, and he has to go and comfort John while Lois is totally worn out. He just lets Lois go to stay in bed, and he goes and takes care of the baby. And then beyond that, we see some of him just going through his day, saving a school bus, having like a tense interaction with Lex Luthor, having a little bit of time at the Daily Planet. We're getting a sense of like, oh my gosh, there is so much in a single day to Superman's life. In some ways, I feel like the recent Superman movie was trying to capture something similar, but I just really like the down-to-earth nature of this, the simplicity of this story. In addition to taking on the things you would normally expect to see Superman taking on, he also takes a quiet moment to sit with a dying elderly man in a hospital who doesn't have anyone else to sit with him, and he just sits and stays with him until the very end. It's very moving, and just speaks to Superman's love of people, love of individuals. In fact, I think there is something Christ-like about this Superman story, how he's being portrayed. Just panels later, he is walking out of the hospital after this man has passed away, and we see portrayed the idea that he is hearing from all over the place people that are crying out for help, that are depressed, that someone has just died, crying out to God. Why God? Crying out because they're hungry or thirsty, and just you sense the weight of the world on his shoulders because there is so much hurt, there's so much pain, and he is not in a position to fix it all. Now, in terms of like the Christ parallel, or maybe just the parallel to Yahweh, Superman here, his limitation in being able to fix everything is his ability. He does not have the ability to do that. But in the case of God, he is allowing for a time humans to have freedom to just infect the world with all kinds of sin. There is a certain aspect of God's plan that involves him not fixing and solving every problem. And yet, we have every reason to believe in through the character of Christ, that God is no less mournful of the pain and suffering that people are going through. He looks over the city of Jerusalem and says, "Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, who stones her prophets, how I would have longed to gather you like a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, but you were not willing." So it's not a perfect parallel, but I still found it very moving, and I suspect that's part of the reason why, for me in particular, I found that moving. But no, at the end of the day, Superman, with all of his powers, is a man with very mortal limitations. He finishes the day. It's dark when he gets home. He's missed dinner, so he's just eating the leftover pizza on the table. He finally gets to bed, kisses Lois, and his eyes close for just a moment, and then in the very last panel, you hear the baby screaming in the background. And I mean, if there aren't, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, if there aren't parents all over the world that can't relate to that. So I just loved how this humanized Superman showed us his heart and gave me, I think unintentionally, some reasons to reflect on the character of Christ as well. So that, again, was, what was it called? Superman Red and Blue 2025 Special number 1. Then we've got, as part of All Fight Month in the DCKO event, we've got Superman versus Captain Atom. Now, in many ways, it was unsatisfying because they're doing some gimmicky stuff. One of the deals with these 1v1 matches is that the Heart of Apocalypse, this entity that's controlling these matches, sets up an arena in some place and time, usually with some significance to the heroes in their personal lives or their history in comic books. The Heart chooses the place for them, and then after the first round, they can choose their own form based on any number of forms that they have ever had in the past or will have in the future. And so in this way, Superman can be the Superman from the story DC 1 Million, where he had been living in the sun for, I don't know, millions of years, thousands of years, and was glowing yellow because he'd absorbed all this yellow radiation. There's like Kingdom Come versions of characters that are showing up in these kinds of scenarios. So that's kind of the idea. It can be what if future, alternate future type stuff. Again, it's this thinly veiled conceit that allows us as readers to see some of our favorite versions or iterations of these characters revived and going up against other characters. But as I said, my preference is to really try to math out, okay, who would actually win? And that's where I think at least the first round of Superman versus Captain Atom number 1 really works for me, because recently in the Absolute Power crossover, where superheroes' powers were getting swapped around, stuff was going on with Captain Atom that was piling on powers to his existing set, to the point that he was becoming like Dr. Manhattan, which there is a bit of a connection there, because originally Alan Moore, when creating Watchmen, was going to use characters from this, I can't remember the name of the publishing company that was absorbed by DC, but it had Captain Atom, Blue Beetle, and it was going to be those characters that Charlton Comics, I think. It was going to be those characters that were going to be the cast of characters in Watchmen, but he wasn't allowed to use them, so he had to come up with these different versions of them that were still kind of similar in some ways. And so Dr. Manhattan is based originally on the concept of Captain Atom, although Dr. Manhattan became like uber powerful, could basically do anything, and Captain Atom has not really been that. But it looks like someone in DC editorial said, hey, why don't we catch up Captain Atom to the Dr. Manhattan concept? And while they haven't taken him all the way there, with the events of Absolute Power last year, Captain Atom became massively powerful. And so when I saw this Superman versus Captain Atom, I'm like, well, Superman is kind of like the most respected hero in DC Comics. Even if Batman is the most loved by fans, Superman is kind of like the most respected. And if someone's going to triumph in the end, it's going to be Superman, right? Well, he does ultimately triumph in this one in kind of a cheesy way. But the first round is like, okay, now that actually is what I wanted to see, because Captain Atom basically just dissolves Superman. And the Heart of Apocalypse, after each round, resurrects these characters so they don't have to worry about dying permanently. But after round 1, I was like, yes, that is what I want to see that is what I want to see represented, because right now, in terms of how these characters are written, what their status quo is, their power set, all that kind of stuff, that is what would happen. So at least round one of Superman versus Captain Atom #1 was satisfying to me. Next up, we've got Action Comics 1092. This is continuing a story arc that has been retracing the Superboy concept, which has been kind of in and out of DC continuity over the years, and recently has come back as like, yes, there was a period where first Clark Kent or Kal-El was Superboy in Smallville. I've had mixed feelings about it, but this iteration, I've been warming up to it since pretty close to the beginning, because he's not a fully formed Superman. I mean, even in the cover for 1092, he's got red sneakers on, and his trunks look a little bit like boxer shorts, so he doesn't have his full finished costume. Like, okay, as long as the true blue finished product of him as a hero doesn't begin here, I guess I can be okay with that. But also what I like about this story is it's giving an opportunity to show Clark figuring out how to be a superhero, not always factoring in everything he should when rescuing someone. There's an old woman that he rescues from a truck that's about to plow right into her. He swoops, yanks her off of the street, and she starts freaking out. Why? Because she is blind, and she didn't even know that truck was going to hit her. All she knows is she was snagged by someone, yanked off of her feet, and now she is screaming hysterically. And Superboy, who moved so fast that not only did this woman not see what he did, but other bystanders didn't see exactly what happened. They just see this woman freaking out and Superboy standing there with his hands on her, basically. And so there's this moment where people are seeing Superboy as this villain, and he's realizing this is complicated stuff. And I really like these kinds of Superman stories. I think that Superman is often viewed as this overly simplistic character that always does the right thing, and he's boring and stuff like that. But I like it when he's a character who does the right thing, but is sometimes misunderstood. And he has to take the noble path of doing the right thing even when he is misunderstood. That's the path of Christ. That's one of the reasons why I liked the Man of Steel movie so much, because there was a misunderstood Superman there who was nobly committed to still doing the right thing. And we see little shades of that here in this issue, as well as a really nice flirtatious moment between Ma and Pa Kent. Anytime you can portray a happy marriage that remains romantic and flirtatious deep into your marriage years, I think that's a great thing to put forth. There's so many stories where people are, well, and there's real stories of people getting divorced, marriages falling apart, but even in fiction, there's a lot of that kind of going on just for the sake of creating dramatic tension. And I think it's great to have real and also as well fictional examples of marriages that remain beautiful and warm and increasingly rich as the years go on. So anyway, yeah, Action Comics 1092 had some good stuff going on for me. Next up, Green Lantern Corps #10. This follows up on the reveal that John Stewart is somehow still alive on some alien planet running a farm with Katmatui. And I thought I was going to get an explanation for that in this issue and did not. Instead, there was kind of a reference to something that happened in a story I haven't read yet. So I'm like, oh crap, I think it's called Green Lantern Horatio or something, where I guess at some point not too long ago in publishing history, in a mini-series that I missed, John Stewart somehow split himself into two beings, but it's not like one is the copy and one's the real one. It's like the John Crichton story from Farscape, where he was twinned in a sense, and both of them are equal, both of them are original. Well, recently in another Green Lantern story, John Stewart died, and so this is the remaining other John Stewart. Oh, and his name is John. There's some interesting parallels, Farscape fans. Anyway, so he's returning with Katmatui to the Green Lantern Corps, and it looks like he's going to be pretty front and center. And I like that. And the cover shows him probably most prominently in some ways, but also Kyle Rayner, Guy Gardner, a couple Green Lanterns I don't know. They're a little bit too new for me to be able to pop their names off just immediately. But I like the idea of Jon Stewart and Guy Gardner and Kyle to a lesser degree, but Jon Stewart is just a great choice to headline or lead an ensemble cast in a Green Lantern Corps book. And that is kind of what had been going on for a while. He and Guy Gardner were the main Green Lanterns in the Green Lantern Corps book. So returning to something like that, I think is a good move. I think we're still definitely in a period where Hal Jordan is the main Green Lantern. I never really cared who the main Green Lantern was, as long as they wrote interesting stories about who they were and what they were experiencing. But anyway, I think Hal Jordan being the main Green Lantern, great, but still having a book where we can get Jon Stewart, Guy Gardner, Kyle Rayner, and give them some great focus and treatment is very, very welcome. It's a little bit of a mystery as to how they're going to be treating some of the, let's say, AI-related topics. Jon Stewart is still very much treating the voice of his mother, the recreated AI version of his mother that's living inside of his ring, as not his mother. He says in this comic, listen, out of respect for the fact that you sound like my mother, such and such, da-da-da-da. And so that is kind of like, that's being played pretty consistently. She's been treated as not his mother. However, he's got a younger sister who died years ago that he kind of resurrected with Green Lantern energy, made her permanent in some sense, and now she is a Blue Lantern, but she's still a green energy construct. And so, and in terms of the way she's written and the way we're meant to interact with her as or think about her as audience members, as readers, excuse me, she seems to be treated as someone that worth to think of and invest in as though she is a person. So there's a little bit of inconsistency there. I'm wondering where that's going to go long term, but I think getting an answer to that is more likely given that Jon Stewart, a little bit more than others, seems to be the focus in Green Lantern Corps right now. So that's Green Lantern Corps number 10. Very curious about what's going to be coming. Okay, Batman Deadpool number 1. This is the second in a recent DC Marvel kind of crossover effort. That the first one I saw was Flash and the Fantastic Four. This is certainly more of a kind of fan-pleasing type of pair-up. I think right now, well, for decades, Batman has been the biggest brand in DC Comics, but Deadpool also with the Ryan Reynolds movies has certainly gained a lot of favor and interest among fans. I almost skipped this. I am really over Deadpool. I was over him halfway through maybe watching the first Deadpool movie. He's got some good moments. I just kind of, the shtick, the fourth wall shtick just gets a little heavy-handed after a while and predictable. So the punchlines just don't really catch me off guard and make me chuckle anymore. But there was one moment where Deadpool was just noticing that, like, Batman wasn't reacting to him with all of his weirdness and things that Deadpool was saying, just insane crap coming out of his mouth all the time. That like Batman wasn't flinching or getting upset or frustrated. And he kind of like asks him about like, hey, I'm kind of surprised you're really, keeping it together. Most people don't around me. And Batman says some kind of comment like, I fight crime with teenage boys, and my arch nemesis is a psychotic clown. Have you been talking? It's a great moment. I was like, oh yeah, that totally makes sense. That he wouldn't even he would just not even bat an eye at all of Deadpool's weirdness. So I think for most fans, especially if either of those characters is of interest to you, this maybe is worth at least skimming. I'm at the end of the day, I'm glad that I read it, even though there's only one or two moments that are memorable for me. All right, moving on. Okay, now let's talk about what's memorable. Aquaman versus Hawkman. This is in the pages of Aquaman number 12, part of All Fight Month. This is it, folks. It happened. It finally happened. When I interviewed Jeremy Adams back in the summer or late summer, early fall, I told him that this is one of my favorite things about his run on Aquaman, or probably my favorite thing about his run on Aquaman right now, and was really hoping to see the potential of Aquaman's new powers put on display. What am I talking about? If you're new to what's changed in Aquaman, he has gained the powers because of the Absolute Power event, but it seems like it's actually, with the direction it's going, there's something much deeper and bigger going on. It looked like he had got Mera's powers, his wife's powers, of telekinetically controlling water. But he now has the ability to do this on a scale never seen by Mera, far above and beyond what she ever did. And this is what I have wanted to see Aquaman be able to do for decades. In my own personal paper and pencil DC Heroes role-playing game group back in college, my version of Aquaman in my DC universe was Magneto of water, God of water. He just controlled all water, including water in other people's bodies. Which, as I said, I think in that conversation with Adams, I said, if he has control over water on the level that I'm wanting, no one messes with Aquaman. Like, he can even bat around Superman, because Superman, at the end of the day, like pretty much all life, is made up mostly of water. And if he starts telekinetically messing with that, he could vaporize. He could just squish him apart. And we really see that come into play in this issue. And this also in the context of Hawkman being given some great advantages of nth metal. Some of the most powerful versions of Hawkman are brought to bear against Aquaman. And I think people that are just vaguely aware of Aquaman think of him as that guy on the Super Friends, that guy who can swim and talk to fish. They're probably looking at this kind of matchup and they're going to say, yeah, well, Hawkman's not that great either, but he's at least going to beat the crap out of Aquaman. Well, no, Hawkman has really gained a lot of power if he has like the Claw of Horus and some other nth metal stuff in play. But I mean, with those things in play, actually, Hawkman can be enormously powerful. But even at his most powerful, his most godlike, he could not put down Aquaman because of this factor. He tries to take Aquaman out in space, and he's like, there's no water up here. And Aquaman was like, didn't you hear what I just said? Because he made this remark, a few panels earlier, there's water everywhere. And that's when he takes advantage of the water in Hawkman's own body. And I'm like, yes! Dang it, yes, this is the culmination, nearly. I mean, the true culmination would be for him to pull this on Superman. And he still might, because this whole fight isn't over. Aquaman is about to advance in the ranks. And I think they would be foolish in the next bout that he has with somebody to forget that this happened, that he has this kind of power. So I'm very interested. But I'm trying not to get my hopes up, because like I said, a lot of these bouts, especially in the main DCKO books, they're not approaching it like I want. They're not approaching it really thoughtfully. Man, I really hope that Aquaman going forward in this DCKO event is written very thoughtfully. I don't mind if he gets taken down. It wouldn't surprise me at all. But oh my gosh, this has got to be factored in from now on when we talk about Aquaman's power level. Man, this was chef's kiss, Jeremy Adams. Thank you so much. So that's Aquaman number 12. All right, next up, we've got Superman Unlimited number 7. Okay, well, this continues the curious case of John Kent. I've commented in my content before that it looks like they might be setting him up to be de-aged. They certainly ended his relationship with his boyfriend in a place of near despair. Like the language he was using to talk about how he felt about his life right now was like pre-suicidal in kind of like his language. I was like, this is really a dark place. And I could see that as a place from which they would choose to de-age him, because there's just no hope seemingly for happiness anymore in this status quo. And yet, we're seeing him show up in the pages of Batman and Robin, I believe it was, or maybe it was Detective Comics recently. One of these I just decided not to talk about. But kind of teaming up with Damian Wayne again, which is bittersweet because that combo, those team-ups worked really well when they were both the same age. It's at worst a little weird, at best not as good when they're doing team-ups now and their ages are different. You just don't have the same dynamic of two little boys up to no good, you know? So this issue of Superman Unlimited focuses on John Kent, which first off confuses me. I'm like, okay, this series started out as being about Superman and the whole fact that kryptonite is everywhere now and Superman's abilities have evolved so that now he's got this way in which kryptonite overexposure can trigger this superpower state. They were doing some interesting status quo changes that were centered around Kal-El. But now we're shifting to the focus on John, and I'm like, okay, so what is this book? What is this book about? So the focus broadening out a little bit confusing to me. Also confusing to, well, not confusing to me, I should say, a little disappointing, but still not completely without promise, is John Kent is brought to Smallville, and he is trying to figure out, okay, what's next? There is a reference to the fact that he broke up with his boyfriend and is really kind of a little bit adrift. Lois Lane, his mom, in an effort to kind of give him something to do, something to explore, a new direction in life, she, as the editor-in-chief of Daily Planet as a global organization, opens a branch of the Daily Planet in Smallville, which just has little teeny echoes of the Superman and Lois TV series, even though that wasn't the Daily Planet. But I think this is a nice, if you're not going to de-age John Kent, which I really wish they would, but if you're not, then we've got to figure out how to make him not just kind of like Superman, but gay. You need to bring out personality traits, interests, quirks of who he is, how he thinks, what he values. They did some of that in the John Kent-focused series that was very short-lived, where they brought out briefly the fact that he has these traits in common with Lois, where he seeks truth and he wants justice. He wants to see justice done. And I was like, okay, that's an interesting angle. If you play like, okay, maybe he's got Superman's powers, but his personality is much more like Lois. That gives me something that's interesting and different about him. I think that they could be following up on that here. At the same time, they're using the same gimmick of like, okay, well, now that you're going to be working the Daily Planet here in Smallville, we gotta have a secret identity. So she gives him glasses, just like Clark had glasses. We've seen this bit already with Connor Kent, kind of like doing again what Clark did. And I'm like, first off, we've seen this done before. And secondly, this does not help him be something other than kind of like Superman, but gay. So I wish there was something more creative that they were doing in terms of him having a civilian life than going that route. I don't know. It's very interesting because I wonder if at editorial at DC right now, where he is going, what they're going to do with him is not solidified yet. And different people are just kind of trying different things with him to see if something sticks. And at the same time, like I said earlier, I think there must be a contingent of people that recognize we dropped the ball and we were too soon to age him up. There's more stories to tell because we keep seeing flashback stories of John Kent when he was younger. There are clearly people at DC that feel like we're not done with those stories yet. So, and yet, I think already the John Kent book that lasted, 6 issues, the Secret Six comic that was headlined largely by Jonathan Kent, these did not work out. They were canceled after 6 issues. And so adult John Kent, for whatever reason, is not selling comics, is not working for readers. We can all kind of make our jaded guesses as to why that is. But that's, at the end of the day, the reality is John Kent as an adult is not headlining things well and selling books? Can they build him up as an adult, still an adult version of himself, in little bits like this in other books, and then revisit the idea of him headlining something later on? I don't know. I don't know what they're thinking. Again, I really want them to de-age him, but at least there's maybe some potential here, if they're going to keep him aged up, to start making him a more fully fleshed out character. So that's Superman Unlimited number 7. Then we've got Red Hood versus the Joker, number 1, part of All Fight Month, DCKO. This is the bout that just makes too much sense to happen in this event. And in more layers than I thought. It's interesting to me because they fight in 3 rounds, and then they can change their form to a different version of themselves between rounds. So the first round is just the status quo Joker versus status quo Red Hood. But then in round 2, Jason Todd picks the version of himself that he was when he was killed by the Joker. And the Joker follows suit, picks that version of himself, and the bout takes place in the warehouse with the bomb ticking down, just like happened in the famous Death in the Family story. Only this time, Joker did not get the drop on Robin. He didn't have thugs to help in beating him up and taking him off guard and stuff. And so Jason Todd, as that version of Robin, beats the tar out of Joker. I think even like with a crowbar. I mean, he really, it's in some ways there's a sense of satisfaction, a grim satisfaction in seeing that happen. But I think it's more interesting just the window inside of Jason Todd that we get throughout this story, where in this unlikely place, there's kind of almost a retconning, but at the very least an establishing of why he chose to go with the Red Hood identity. A really strange choice at the time, that he came back from the dead as the Red Hood, because the Red Hood was the Joker before he became the Joker. Jason Todd killed by the Joker. Why would he model himself after anything connected to the Joker? Well, they kind of establish here, if it hadn't been elsewhere that I'm unaware of, that the Red Hood gang was kind of a legend that had been around for a while, and the Joker was just kind of like one in a line of them. Actually, that was established elsewhere, but that Jason was aware of the Red Hood gang growing up, and his friends would even like pretend to be the Red Hood. That's instead of like, I don't know, cowboys and Indians or cops and robbers or whatever, they would play Red Hood on the playground. And so that's where they are saying in this issue, the origins of him becoming Red Hood are really found. I mean, that's obviously not the case necessarily in what the writers were thinking when they brought him back from the dead. But all that to say, there's some surprisingly interesting stuff that we get into in terms of Jason Todd's motivations, how he thinks about himself, how he thinks about how other heroes in the DC universe think of him, and the dynamic between him and the Joker, how people think of him in light of the Joker. I mean, just some neat stuff that I did not expect to find interesting in Red Hood versus the Joker number 1. Then we've got The Flash number 28, and this has Jay Garrick going up against Guy Gardner, and really this is a placeholder representing 26, 27, and 28, because I've been very interested in seeing how I would feel about this book now that Mark Waid is back writing it. The last writer, I believe, was Simon Spurrier, and did a lot of weird technobabble sci-fi stuff that involved a lot less running than I want from my Flash comics. So I found that very disappointing. I actually checked out and stopped reading until I knew that Spurrier's run was done. I read the last issue when I realized it was his last, and then found out Mark Waid was coming next. And I was like, okay, very interesting. Obviously, Mark Waid has a very legendary run on this character that reinvigorated the Flash mythos like has never been done before or since. I mean, it was really something. So for him to be coming back to it, obviously, that feels to me like a break glass in case of emergency type of move. I can't help but wonder if other people were checking out of Spurrier's run on the Flash. I have no idea on the sales numbers. But Wade is certainly not only a safe choice, but I think a fan-pleasing choice. And I'm liking it so far in that it's getting back to taking us inside Wally's head. With each issue starting with my name is Wally West, I'm the Flash, the fastest man alive, Even with the Jay Garrick issue, he says, I'm still the Flash, it's just a different take on it. But Wade takes us inside of the main protagonist's head, and I like that a lot. I want to know what drives the character, what they're worried about, what their fears are. It helps me invest in the tension of the crazy action that I, of course, also want to see. So anyway, like that Wade is back, but the art still has a little bit of a whimsical, almost kind of kitty type vibe. It's not kitty, that's not being fair, but it's somewhere between serious and Teen Titans Go. And a little bit too much in the Teen Titans Go direction. So I wouldn't mind at all. In fact, I would like it if a new artist took over. But, if fans are loving it, maybe that's what the kiddies want today. Instead of worrying about old man Pater. So anyway, that's The Flash number 28. Just two more to finish up here. First off, JSA Year 1, Chapter 2. I did also read Chapter 1, so just commenting briefly about JSA numbers 13 and 14, which are the beginnings of a Year 1 story arc that's reestablishing the origins of the Justice Society. I'm liking this. It's a nice reminder of these characters, where they come from. It's a novelty to see them kind of meeting for the first time. There's a minor shrug for me in that they are not blatantly establishing Alan Scott as being gay, but you don't really have to read much between the lines to see that going on there. That still would not be my choice for a number of reasons, both continuity and, of course, where I'm at as a Christian on those issues. And, I also read... I was reading some back issue from not too long ago over the Christmas break where it was an Alan Scott story, and he was interacting with his wife, Molly. And the internal thought bubble, in an internal thought bubble, he was saying to himself, she's so beautiful. Why did I wait so long to marry her? And he said, have I told you today that I love you? And she's like, not since this morning. Why? And so when they take us inside of his head and show this love that he has for his wife and wishing he would have married her earlier. I mean, you really have to bend over backwards to say this is a gay man, and when he loved her, he didn't love her in that way or whatever. I mean, there's just no getting around it. It was a very violent continuity shift to do that, and it's a bummer because I don't think it's yielded better stories. So that's anyway. But the rest of JSA Year 1 stuff I'm enjoying. We're seeing the beginnings of the Spectre from a different angle. It's clear, and I'm a big fan of the Spectre, especially in particular the John Ostrander, Tom Mandrake run. And this is the classic Jim Corrigan that was featured in that run, but still pretty early, still pretty new to being the Spectre. And yet it's clear that if he's not the Spectre yet, the Spectre has his eye on him in some sense. We don't see him become the Spectre, but we see these hints of green tints to his eyes that indicate something supernatural is going on, or maybe that's just a symbolic foreshadowing that he's going to become the Spectre. That's not clear to me at this point, but I like this classic version of the Spectre, and I think he could play very interestingly against the more traditional heroics of the rest of the Justice Society. So I hope we'll see that kind of clash coming up in the next issue. Also cool to see Hippolyta back as Wonder Woman in the classic 1940s JSA. So just some neat stuff. As a person who became a fan of the JSA, especially during Jeff Johns' run, which had so many nods to the Golden Age, I really like seeing this kind of story happen. And, even with my shrugging with the Alan Scott stuff, I'm still enjoying Alan Scott as a character, especially since they're not leaning into that aspect of him in this story in particular. I like these characters. I like this team, and I'm looking forward to the next issue. Then finally, we've got Cheetah and Cheshire rob the Justice League number 5. I did also read number 4. And just regarding both of them, I would say, okay, in 4 and 5, this is when the heist is actually taking place. We've had these 3rd and 4th tier villains and peripheral to villain characters part of this scheme to rob the Justice League's vault of the power bank, which is a concept that came about as a result of absolute power. The power bank is a plan that the JLA's science-y characters put into place so that if powers are stolen or lost again, they would have a way, using this sci-fi power bank, to restore their powers. But, of course, when the villains realize this is a thing that exists, they're like, people will pay big money for this if this can just give powers of the Justice League to other people. It is a crazy 1950s kind of comic book concept, but I'm okay with kind of just accepting it as existing. I think that it can't exist for long. I think this is just too dangerous of a concept for this very reason. But I love that it exists right now and is the reason for this heist taking place. I love that we're out of the planning stages. We're now seeing the part of the heist movie where they are sneaking around in the dangerous place trying to get away with what they're doing. We're seeing how their plan is working, how it's not, how they have to react in the moment. So there's just some neat stuff going on. This is, it's maybe not quite getting me invested in some of these 3rd and 4th tier characters as I would like, probably because there's just a few too many to share focus. But I'm still really enjoying this character-driven focus on these lesser-known villains of the DC Universe, presenting them as kind of underdogs. And yes, I am rooting for them, despite all the chaos that the power bank being out in the hands of villains will bring to the DC Universe. I'm absolutely rooting for Cheetah and Cheshire to rob the Justice League, and I'm looking forward to issue number 6. Whew! All right, at long last, that's the end. This week, I have chosen the green ring representing my experience reading comic books because, holy crap, it took some focus and willpower, more than I thought, over a period of days to catch up on reading all these comics. I read a lot more than just these. These are just the ones that I focused on that released over the last 6 to 7 weeks. And oh my gosh, it took some focus. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that. I hope to never have to do this level of catching up again. But those are all of my thoughts on comic books for now. As always, as a reminder, you can get this content in podcast format, the Essential Issues podcast. You can find that on podcast services, also at spiritblade.com. Hope you'll check out christiangeekcentral.com. A bunch of links to content there made for you as we continue to geek out and seek the truth. For more chat about geek entertainment, answers to your questions, and news from the wider world of Christian geekery, get the Christian Geek Central podcast today on iTunes and other podcast services.